All right. Hello and good morning, everyone. We'd like to thank you all for joining us for today's virtual workshop on behalf of the California Department of Veterans Affairs and the California Transition Assistance Program. We would like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is titled Listening to Help Support Mental Health. We have a lot of great information to share with you today. We have some great guest speakers. I'm really thankful for all your partnership and your time in joining us today. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Derek Rose. I serve as a training coordinator for the California Transition Assistance Program with CalVet. So I'm honored to be hosting this webinar today with my colleagues and to presenting this information with you all today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Just some general housekeeping for today's presentation. We do have the microphones and cameras muted and turned off if you are not one of our panelists for today. This just helps eliminate some of the distractions and saves on bandwidth for the rest of the group and the presenters as well. As far as the agenda goes today, we're going to be covering some information related to California-specific veterans benefits that are offered here in the state, and a little bit of an overview of the CalTAP program and how to connect with us and find our services that are available. We're also joined by our regional representative from the Central Coast region today with CalVet, Mr. Calvin Angel. So he's going to do an overview of some of the local and regional assistance that's offered through CalVet. And then we're joined by our guest speaker today, Mr. Robert Storr with US Vets. So we're really thankful and really appreciative of all your partnership today. And we have a lot of great information to cover. So we're excited. During the presentation, if you do have questions about anything that we're covering, we do encourage you to use that Q&A tab. There's two tabs. There's a chat tab and there's a Q&A tab. That chat tab is going to be for my colleague, Sean, to send out information and links and resources as we're speaking along. But if you yourself have questions, please use that Q&A tab. That allows each panelist to actually see that question, and then the appropriate subject matter expert can either answer it right there on the spot, or we'll allow some time at the end of the presentation for questions, and we'll go through those as needed. So the CalTAP overview, what exactly is the CalTAP program? Well, CalTAP is designed to inform and connect veterans of all eras to their federal and state benefits. And the way that we've done that is through our Pathways program. And you can see what each one of those 5 pathways are. So anything from our core curriculum, which is, we're going to cover a little bit today, which is basically Veterans VA 101, right? It's how to get enrolled in healthcare services with the VA, how to file claims for disability compensation, what exactly are my veterans benefits federally and here in the state of California, and our additional pathway programs. If you are planning to go back to school, if you're looking for that next job or career, if you wanted to start your own business, or if you wanted to provide services to the veteran community, whether that's you're an employer or you provide legal services or just a cultural competency trainings and learning modules that you can navigate as well. So all of this is through our website, through our program, and we're just going to show you kind of how to find us and navigate some of these resources as well. I would also like to give a plug to our California Veterans Resource Book. This is a great tool to keep handy. If you do not have a hard copy of this book, we can send out a PDF version through the chat. So I do encourage you to download this and keep it handy. It's basically an A to Z listing of all of the benefits that you can imagine, whether it's federal, state, local assistance. It gives the contact information for all of your local offices and your county veteran service offices. So I do encourage you to keep this handy and use it as a reference going forward. So our website, this is the CalVet's main homepage, calvet.ca.gov. And you can find our program, CalTAP, down there in the middle right on that red icon. On CalTAP, that would bring you to all of those pathways that I mentioned. But for today's presentation, we just want to do a brief focus on that core curriculum. So if we clicked on our core curriculum, that'll bring you to all of the modules within that pathway. So, and like I said, anything from healthcare, claims and compensation, discharge information, how to manage all of your records, and everything of that nature. So, but what we want to highlight for today is that Module 5, which are the California specific benefits that are offered here in the state for veterans and their families. So what are my California benefits? So we'll just do a quick overview of some of the services that are offered. So first and foremost, a great benefit that we offer is our college and tuition fee waiver for dependents, for dependent children and spouses, if eligible, with 100% VA rating. So this, if you have a service-connected disability with the VA, this allows your child to attend any state school in California tuition free. So it's a great benefit, and do encourage you to at least assess your eligibility for this program as well. There are a few DMV programs that we sponsor. One is the designation on your driver's license, which just allows you to have the word veteran printed on your driver's license so that you can show that for all of your local benefits, local discounts, and so that you don't have to carry around your DD-214 everywhere you go. If you have a 100% rating from the VA and your mobility is impaired, you can qualify for the motor vehicle registration fee waiver. So you would just send that information to DMV with your certification, and your fees would be waived annually for your registration. If you're into recreational activities, California is a great place for those activities. If you have a 50% rating from the VA, you can qualify for reduced fees on your hunting and fishing licenses, as well as a state parks pass that allows you a no-cost entry into all of the California state parks. Again, if you have a 100% rating, you can apply through your county assessor's office for a veteran property tax exemption up to a certain amount. You just have to double check with the county of what their veterans exemption is. So do encourage you to, if you have that eligibility, to file that with the county. Business license, tax and fee exemption. If you sell any products or services and you need a business license to do so, you can always check with your local office, whether it's city or county, to see if they will honor that waiver for you for that fee. So some of the divisions, specific divisions that we have at Calvet, of course, our Veteran Services Division, which is our division where CalTAP lies. We also have our Calvet Home Loans Program, which is a great program for home ownership using your VA home loan eligibility. If you're interested, in purchasing a home, just want to show you why reaching out to Calvet may be a good option for you. We have our women's veterans and our minority and underrepresented divisions at Calvet as well. Do a lot of great work and outreach for some of our underserved veterans in the state of California. Also, Calvet operates 8 homes for long-term care, all the way through skilled nursing facilities. So if that time of need does come for you or your family member or a friend who's a veteran, just know that they have that eligibility for residency in a Calvet Veterans Home. And Calvet also operates 3 state cemeteries. You may be familiar with the National VA Cemetery Administration, but Calvet operates 3 on a state level as well. So some additional ways that you can stay connected with us and stay up to date on all of this information. You can always reach out to us directly through our email address, and we can include you in our future announcements. You can always register on our webpage for a My Calvet account. This just allows you to create a personalized profile through our website. You can stay up to date with all of the updates on veterans news and services and benefit information. You can always follow us along on social media by scanning those QR codes right there on your screen, which will allow you to attend our future webinars that we're hosting. And we also do encourage your feedback. You'll see right there where it says fill out today's webinar survey. That is a QR code just for a quick survey after we conclude. We really do value this feedback to make sure that we are presenting all of the relevant and most updated information for you all who's attending. So we do encourage you to take that survey if you have a brief moment. I mentioned My Calvet a slide ago. This is how you register. You could just go on our webpage, click register right there, and you can create a profile. This is our monthly newsletter that we publish. Every month we have a theme, kind of a topic that we're covering. So whether it's mental health or employment, that theme will be covered in our newsletter. We have a message from our Deputy Secretary, Keith Boylan, every month. And it also allows you to register for all of our events through our virtual workshops, whether it's done through Zoom, or if you happen to be in an area where we have an in-person workshop, we do encourage you to attend those as well. So this is just another way for you to stay connected, stay up to date with all of the latest up-to-date news and information through Calvet. So some additional VA resources I wanted to share with you. VA.gov is a great starting place for all of your needs as well. You may be familiar with the VA at this point already, but anything from healthcare, disability, compensation, GI Bill information, all of your awards and letters and things of that nature through VA. So that's just a brief FYI for you. So I know that was kind of information overload in a short period of time, but I hope that kind of sparked your interest, and maybe you learned a thing or two about veterans benefits that maybe you didn't know before. So again, my name is Derek Rose. Please feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. I'll be happy to take all the time that's needed to go over anything with you. So up next, I believe we have Mr. Calvin Angel, who's our link out of the Central Coast region. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Calvin. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate it. As Derek said, I am the local interagency network coordinator for the state of California, specifically Central Coast California. There are actually 8 of us. Next slide, please. So as you see here in this map of California, so the state is divided into 8 separate sections. Each of these regions represents a link in their region. As you can tell, the entire state is covered. My section there in yellow. If you're in that area and you are in need of some information or resource, anything along those lines, please reach out to me and I'd be more than willing to connect with you and help you out in any way. We are considered resource experts, and that'll come up on the next slide. Don't change that. And part of what we do is just connecting you to what you need. Our job is to be resource experts and have resources, relationships to those resources already connected. So as you look again through this map, you can see we are, as I said earlier, covering the entire state. If you move anywhere throughout this state, you will be certain to have someone who you can reach out to as a resource for veteran services and or benefits. And we do look forward to helping you out. So please, I'm sure this map will be made available to you. And if it's not a resource or a service that you need, think about someone else, perhaps a friend or family member who is a veteran in this area, and perhaps they've had questions, So again, refer back to this map. Next slide, please. So I said earlier, we are links, local interagency network coordinators. So what do? We provide outreach to service members, veterans and their families, make referrals, and work directly with established service providers, assist with local emergencies, provide leadership and local and advocacy to local communities. So with a little more detail, what that means essentially is, for example, the recent DRC's disaster relief centers that were open. If you were unfortunate to be affected by the floods that recently happened throughout the state, then you may have had to visit one of the DRCs. We are in all of the DRCs throughout the state, and we are there to help the veterans who come on site who maybe need some assistance in regards to replacing documents, where to go. If you're a Calvet homeowner, for example, we could certainly direct you with where to go to get started and getting your home repaired and that process going. So as you look here, you can see we can help you in so many areas. And I'll refer back to the top line where it does say service members, veterans, and their families. So if you have family members or you're a family member of a veteran, again, reach out to us and we can certainly answer any questions that you may have. Next slide, please. So connecting to benefits, a large part of what we do is connecting you to your benefits. And that will come in a line along the lines of connecting you to a CVSO in your area. We all know all of the county veteran service officers in our communities, in our regions, and we have a relationship with all of them. So it is very much a warm handoff from us to them. I encourage you to remember that though every community has these county veteran service office, if you find that you're not receiving the services in that community, in that particular office that satisfy you, you're more than welcome to go to another office and take your case or your appeal or whatever it is that you're working on to another county. And that is your right. So you're not committed to that. All right. I also want to make sure people understand that. As it says here, connecting to benefits, employment and training. Obviously, I know many of the people that work in the EDD offices are typically they're located in the job centers. And as I mentioned earlier, County Veteran Service Office more than willing to make that connection for you. And again, if you have questions or concerns about any of these offices that you visit, please reach out to the link in your area, make them aware that the service was either great and imperfect or whatever your concerns might be. Next slide, please. So here is my contact information. The other information is certainly going to be made available to you as well, but feel free to take down my information and I'd be more than willing to connect you with the other links throughout the state. But hopefully you have their information. So as I said earlier, it may not be you, excuse me, it may not be you that needs the service, but always think about other veterans or family members in your life who maybe do have questions or concerns. And do please share our information with them so that we can help them in any way necessary. Thank you for your time. Derek, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Calvin. Always appreciate your time and all of the information. Great. So at this point, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for today, Mr. Robert Storr, who is the Executive Director with US Vets. So we're honored and really appreciative of Robert's time today and joining us for today's webinar. So with that, Robert, I will go ahead and stop sharing on my end, and then I will allow you to pull up your own slides there. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Outstanding. Great.
Thank you.
The floor is yours, Robert. Thanks again.
Thank you, Derek, and thank the staff here at CalTAP and CalVet. You have done an incredible job of continuing to get the mental health and suicide prevention information out to the community. And so it's a privilege to be here working with you today again. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here as well. My name, as mentioned, is Robert Storr, and I'm the Executive Director of one of 12 sites of US Vets. US Vets is the largest nonprofit across the country working with homeless veterans. At my particular site right here in downtown Los Angeles, we're really working on prevention and early intervention programs that take care of our veterans and active duty military as they transition to veterans, to assist them in making sure they get the support as they transition to not end up in dire straits. So we do that through employment, mental health, a special program for women veterans, training, and an aftercare program to take care of veterans that have recently been housed. So it's a privilege to be here. A little bit about my background. I've been a licensed marriage, family, child therapist for over 30 years. Formerly, I was the director for the Suicide Prevention Center prior to coming to US Vets for Orange County, LA, Ventura. I've been training police, SWAT, teenagers, school teachers, parents about suicide prevention, and most recently, of course, veteran service agencies, and bringing the information to the veteran community. It's important now in the field of suicide prevention that we take a public health approach. We really look at the opportunity to really begin to really understand that suicide is everybody's business, and that we need to understand what it is and how to address it and how we talk about it so that we get comfortable really beginning to move the needle in terms of how we're addressing it. So I will be doing a little bit of that today and really working to help you understand how you can be comfortable sharing the information. And so I appreciate you all being here for this information. All right, let me see if I can advance the slides here and get us moving. My computer's a little slow, or it seems to be a little stuck. But again, the goal today is for you to be able to walk away with an ability to not only understand the subject, but feel like you have the ability to interact with somebody who's suicidal and to be comfortable with that. So I really hope that you feel free to ask questions towards the end of us and really get comfortable being able to talk about the subjects with a little more freedom. Derek, I can't seem to be able to operate the slides moving forward. Do you think you can assist me at that? Let's see if I can work on that.
Yeah, I can take back control. Sometimes also what works is if you see that page down key on your keyboard, sometimes that's a little easier to use than actually clicking the mouse. But if it's
Yeah, I think I'll let you take
no
control here. I'll
worries.
stop the share here.
Okay. Just let me know, Robert, how you want to advance slides. Just say next
Sure.
slide. I'll be right
Yep.
here for you.
Great, thank you.
Can you all see that?
Yes, sure can. So moving to the next slide. So we're going to talk today about listening. It's important. It seems like a very simple concept, but listening really is the key to all of our work in mental health and case management, but specifically in the area of suicide prevention as well. As a therapist as well, and anybody who works in this field, listening's more than just hearing the words. It's the opportunity to really connect with an individual. And if we've learned anything through the pandemic, it's really the opportunity to understand how important connection is. If you work with anybody, especially in the area of mental health or suicide prevention or case management, people have to trust you. People have to understand that you can hear them, and not only hear them, that you can respond to them when they speak. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it is an opportunity to connect, and it's an important component about what we'll be talking today. Next slide. So let me talk to you a little bit about suicide prevention. Next slide, in terms of how it began. And next one. It's really important to understand that Suicide Prevention Center here, and move forward. Suicide prevention here actually began in Los Angeles. And the interesting thing as we move forward is that it began with the veteran community. And the two veterans at the top, Norman Farborough and Edmund Schneidman, are really what we call the fathers of suicide prevention. Prior to the 50s, there was no such thing as suicide prevention. We didn't really understand that we could prevent people from dying by suicide. It was assumed that people who were suicidal would take their lives, and there was nothing we could do about it. Well, Norman Farborough and Evan Schneidman were working at the VA hospital right here in Brentwood, and they were doing an analysis, actually, as they were writing notes to grieving widows. They were doing analysis of how many veterans had died by suicide, and they were curious as to what the reasons were. So they were the first researchers. So they asked the coroner to do an experiment, and the experiment consisted of looking at actual notes that were left behind by someone who died by suicide, and then also having new notes that were not real authentic notes along with those to see if they could discern the difference. And what they found, next point, was they found that really people that were dying by suicide really did not want to die. That the reality was that people that died by suicide were struggling with what they later termed ambivalence, the desire to die, but also the desire to try to live. That what people that were dying by suicide were in a specific situation that was a crisis-oriented situation where they weren't able to deal with the pain that was associated with the crisis, and that they were struggling to feel like they could live, but they were losing the struggle. When they learned that they could really talk to people about the struggle and help them, they learned they could intervene. What happened next was Marilyn Monroe died in terms of the movement. She died in the early 60s, and they were called upon to rule whether it was a suicide or a homicide. And they ruled it was a suicide. And when that information became public, because it was a widespread issue at the time, their phones began ringing off the hook, and their wives assisted them at becoming the first suicide prevention counselors over the phone. And the birth of the movement started there because people called from all over the country saying, wait, I have these same feelings and I don't know how to deal with it. And so they began the first suicide prevention center right here in Los Angeles. And Edmund Schneidman went on to create 60 suicide prevention centers throughout the United States. There's over 120 now associated with crisis lines. Next slide. So what we figured out in terms of the need was in 2021, there were 48,000 deaths, and that men were dying by suicide 4 times more often than women. Women attempted more often, but men were dying 4 times more often, making up 3/4 of the suicide. It's now the second leading cause of death in veterans under the age of 45. And why is this important? 13th overall. And that veterans make up a disproportionate amount of suicide, over 16% annually. And the last point there was veterans died by suicide because they most likely had access to lethal means, firearms. And that also holds true for the general population. Women don't typically die by suicide with access to firearms, so it makes it more lethal for men. What this meant for us and why this is important was I use the analogy of heart disease as a health condition. Suicide is a health condition. It's a public health condition. And the reality is, we get smart about understanding it. We'll begin to understand how we can prevent it. But we also have to understand, how do we assess those at risk? If you look at heart disease as an instance, people with high cholesterol, high blood pressure, who maybe have a history of heart disease and have symptoms of heart issues, generally, if you go to your physician, the physician will check your weight, check your blood pressure, check your cholesterol to make sure that they can prevent or look at preventing a heart issue. Well, what if we got wise enough about suicide to understand that we can do the same thing? If we get comfortable talking about it, if you understand the subject, you'll begin to understand exactly what you can do today to assist people at preventing them from dying by suicide. Next. So, what makes a person suicidal? Let's take a look. Here is the most important factor. Suicide's a complex issue. There is no single cause of suicide. And the reality is, we often get confused and think that someone who had a relationship issue or a financial issue, we saw in the news they died by suicide. And what we don't understand is there's multiple factors. And the reason this is important, because when you assess suicide, you don't want to look at everybody in a crisis, relationship or financial or otherwise, and think, oh, they're risk of dying. There are other factors that are working at the same time. And I'm going to break them down in 2 basic categories so we can understand them more clearly. There are risk factors, as we mentioned, like with heart disease. If I am overweight, not exercising, not eating properly, have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, then I'm at risk. If I do things like watch my weight, eat healthy, exercise, and do the right things to take care of my health, I'm going to reduce the risk. Same thing with suicide. To prevent suicide among veterans, we have to figure out what those protective factors are that keep people alive and what minimize the risk factors. So next slide. We have to look then very closely at what are the risk factors. The risk factors break down to the left: prior suicide attempt, mental health issues, substance abuse, access to lethal means, a recent loss, especially if you're a veteran that's lost somebody or an individual who's lost somebody by suicide. Statistics tell us 40 to 50% of us, over half of us, will know that someone that we knew died by suicide. We mentioned the last 4 are sort of crisis issues: legal, financial challenges, relationship issues, unemployment, and homelessness. The top one, prior suicide attempt, is important. If somebody has a history, if you do an analysis, if you do an intake and you talk to somebody and you make it safe for them to talk about suicide, which is very important, and I'll go through that in a little bit. If people reveal that, they tell you they've had a previous attempt, that tells you a lot right away, that they've actually crossed over that line of risking taking their lives by an actual attempt. And if you've done it once, it makes it possible that you will do it again. Now, caveat here, not everybody that's had an attempt will go on to die by suicide. In fact, most won't. But that's the most recognizable risk factor that we want to understand when we talk about suicide. And we want to make it safe for someone to reveal that. And we may not have to do anything about it at all, but I'll tell you why later. Let's look at the protective factors. So how do you mitigate these? Well, you give people access to mental health. It's a mental health issue. It's a health issue. You connect people. How do you connect with people? You connect them with their community. You connect them with resources. Most importantly, you're here today. You connect them with you. You let them know you hear and understand them. You support them in problem solving, whatever crisis situation they may be. You capitalize if they have a sense of spirituality, mission, or purpose. Mission and purpose always stands out to me, because I worked in the areas of homelessness, and I was working with the Department of Mental Health, and one of their caseworkers had previously been homeless, and we talked to him and had previously tried to take his life. We talked to him about what got you off the streets? And it was a very simple answer. The outreach worker came one day and gave them flyers to hand out, and he helped hand out the flyers. And what he suddenly had for the first time in a long time was purpose. When he had purpose to his life, he decided that he was going to come off the streets, get sober, and he went on to become a caseworker, an outreach worker for the veteran community. Looking at people understand how to take care of their health, helping them resolve employment, and generally giving people a social, emotional sense of well-being, a sense of connecting to the community, a sense of dealing with mental health issues, a sense of being comfortable. Next slide. So basically, I'm going to run these down in just a brief summary so you can sort of remember them easily. At the top, remember, if someone has a suicide attempt history, that's the most likely sign. As we move around the circle, we look at mental health issues, and mental health issues go on if they're exacerbated by substance abuse, a previous history of trauma, and if somebody's entered a crisis. So very clearly, we look at the combination of these factors, and any one of them can elevate the risk. Over 50% of people who die by suicide, they're found an excess of substances, leading us to believe they probably had a substance abuse issue. So we need to understand and make it comfortable for people to understand if that's an issue and how to access treatment. Exposure to trauma. Most of us have been exposed to some trauma, unfortunately, but if you're in the veteran community, whether you were a combat veteran or not, you most likely were exposed to some trauma in terms of dealing with your service. Next slide. So these are the things, but how do we evaluate whether a risk is actually becoming a crisis? We look at three things, and the first one being, we look at the fact that if somebody has the desire or thoughts. Now, it's important to keep in mind that desire and thoughts in and of itself is in green because many people have thoughts of suicide. If you've lost someone to suicide, you've thought about suicide. If you understand the field, you sometimes may think, oh, I'd be better off dead. Now, if you think that through, most of us will not go on to die by suicide because it's just a thought. It's not something we put into action. However, if you look at the next circle, capability, if we have a previous attempt, if we have thought about how we would do it or when we would do it, then we've moved and elevated our risk. Now, still, those first two bubbles, you may not have to do anything with anybody other than understand you want to check in with them regarding their thoughts or the thoughts if they've accelerated a capability. The last one is most important, intent. And if you follow that arrow down, that's what creates a suicidal crisis. The idea that the three of them together, and intent is the idea, am I likely to act on the thoughts I'm having or the desire? Am I actually going to do it? Am I operationalizing? Am I thinking about doing it? Do I have the motivation or desire? So next slide. So that would create what we call a suicidal crisis. And how do we mitigate that? Well, let's look at the perspective of a suicidal person for just a moment. They're in crisis, so they may be having all of those risk factors, but may be doing okay. But suddenly you're working with someone and they've had those factors, they're in a crisis. That should cause you to pay attention. They're desperate to escape what? Unbearable pain. They're not necessarily wanting to die, but they're in so much pain or anxiety or intense depression that they're having trouble coping. I use this example physically because it's the one thing that helped me understand how intense pain can be. I went into surgery for my knee a couple of years ago, and when I got back, because I knew of the danger of opiates, I didn't fill the prescription for pain medication. Well, as anesthesia wore off toward the middle of the night, my legs started to really hurt. And as it progressed through the night, it got so intense that I couldn't sleep. Eventually, I got up. It was so intense, I could barely bear it. And I thought if something doesn't happen, I would be dead. I would wish I were dead. And I had to get some immediate help to get relief from the pain. When I went through that experience, I thought, oh my God, this must be what people who die by suicide experience. They're coping, they're coping, they're coping. The pain starts up, the pain intensifies, and pretty soon they're aggravated by the anxiety, the pain, or the trouble that they're having on a consistent basis. That should show up if we're talking to somebody. What else happens? Thinking becomes limited. Let's take a look at how that happens in the next slide. The mind does a strange thing when it's under pressure. This is important for all of you to know. If you haven't experienced this, if you've ever been in a particular situation where you have a problem, do you ever notice how your whole day shrinks down to that problem? The feeling is strong, it's intense. You suddenly can't figure out what you're going to do about it, and you become overwhelmed. What happens is if you look at that little tunnel, all of the options on what you could or would or should or want to do are all around you at all the time. I try to remind people in practice all the time that we have unlimited options almost always in terms of problem resolution. But when you're in the crisis, your mind is actually focused, and it's focusing on the problem, not on the options. It's focusing, trying to problem solve, which is sort of counterintuitive. And all of a sudden, you forget about those options, and all you see is there's only one way out. There's never one way out. What's worse is you start to have what we call cognitive distortions. Your thinking starts going along the lines of all or nothing thinking. If I don't resolve this, I'm not going to be okay. If I don't figure out the problem at work, I'm going to lose my job. If I lose my job, I'm not going to have enough money. If I'm not going to have enough money, then I'm not going to be able to survive. And I shouldn't have made that. And it goes on and on. Most of you have probably experienced that spiral. And you know, the minute you find the solution, it stops. So what do? We have to figure out what emotional congruence is happening with our clients, which means when we have a feeling, the mind does this. It starts to search for the answer to the feeling. So what does it do? It analyzes all the problems or situations we're facing that could be problematic. And therefore, again, it's trying to line up a little bit of an analysis, but it's eliminating the possibility that you find the solution. Next slide. So how do we learn to deal with that? We have to look for these warning signs. Now, warning signs are a little different, and they come in three categories. They come in feelings, they come in your ability to look at people's behaviors, and lastly, they come in the statements people make. Now, here's the thing. As I worked at the Suicide Prevention Center, we stopped looking at warning signs as something to stay away from. Normally, when we see warning signs, it's too hot, or the traffic's too busy, or the stoplight's going, the red light stoplight's flashing. We slow down, stop, and we go away. Now, what we need to learn is that a warning sign can be an invitation for us to intercede. And it comes in these three categories as mentioned. Now, not everybody with depression or feeling slightly manic, like they can conquer the world, or dealing with anxiety, is necessarily going to indicate they're suicidal. However, if you're working with someone, or you are someone that those feelings start to accelerate and change, and if you have lived experience, that's a warning sign that something may be imminent and you should pay attention. Also, people, if behaviors change, if they were working with you or you were working with someone, feel like you need to withdraw or engage in reckless behavior, substance abuse, driving quickly, gambling, doing dangerous things with your money, or becoming extremely agitated, oftentimes 24 to 48 hours before someone dies, their agitation raises. And the last one is people who die by suicide do their best to tell us most of the time that they are in danger. The reason they don't tell us more clearly is because they somehow want to signal you for help, but they're afraid that if they do, something will happen that will interfere with their freedom or their safety, or you'll judge them, or you'll shame them, or they're so ashamed themselves. So we have to be very conscious to listen to people when they're in crisis and maybe open up the conversation. Next slide. So learn to recognize these warning signs. If someone's feeling hopeless, feeling like there's no reason to live, or they're talking about it, or if they're suddenly becoming more anxious or agitated, if they're talking about being sleeplessness, if they're prone to outbursts of rage or anger, having trouble controlling their temper, again, if they're engaging in risky activities without thinking about it, all of a sudden they had their alcohol or drug use under control, and that's increasing. And I today understand that it's not just substance abuse, process addictions like gambling, spending money, shopping, overeating, all sorts of things like that have accelerated primarily as coping mechanisms, but can also endanger somebody from staying safe. And somebody's withdrawing from family and friends. Next slide. So again, let me summarize with these four components. And I'm going to go through some clues on how you work with this, and then go lastly into how you really would engage and talk with somebody. So again, we talked about desire. Is desire dangerous? It can be, but in and of itself, a lot of people have thought about suicide. It's kind of a symptom of depression. It's often a passing thought. If they've been exposed to suicide, it will enter their thought processes. In and of itself, it's a cautious warning sign, but not a dangerous one necessarily. If We couple it with capability, with the idea that someone has actually had an attempt, a previous attempt, or has thought about how they would do it. And the last one, intent. If someone says, not only have I thought about it and thought about how I would do it, I don't know if I can keep myself safe. Then you've got somebody in a high suicidal risk. The last one is in green, is buffers, is that's the other side of risk factors, which is protective factors. How do you counteract that and work with someone? And I'm going to give you one little fact before we move on to the next slide. In the Suicide Prevention Center here in Los Angeles, it takes over 100,000 calls a year. Of those calls, the percentage that end up in having to initiate a rescue or having to get someone to a hospital is roughly 3 to 5%. So 95% of the time, if we make it safe with people who actively are thinking and want to die by suicide, we can help de-escalate. Now, this isn't going to give you enough information to do that with everybody. So know that the Veteran Crisis Line or the Crisis Line, now that it's a 3-digit number, can be an excellent resource for you to find out how to do it or to connect somebody that's struggling to do it. I worked with attempt survivors in developing a manual on how to help people reduce the likelihood that they would attempt. And I would always ask them, did you call the crisis line? And the answer almost always was no. And the next question I would ask is, what was the reason you didn't call? The reason was I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I felt they would judge me. I didn't know if they would call 911. The Crisis Center has wonderful volunteers trained not to judge, but to be open and accepting. And they don't call 911 unless they absolutely know they can't keep you safe. So they go through intensive training to know how to de-escalate. That may not be something you can do, but you can get somebody connected to that resource to make sure they know how to access it. Next slide. Let's look at those carefully as we go between the three while listening. Again, there's desire, the thoughts that I might want to die by suicide. Desire is coupled with, capability. Have I had a previous attempt? Do I have a plan? And lastly, intent. So again, you can start out talking to people if they've ever had the thoughts or desire. You can assure people that that's, not that uncommon. It is fairly uncommon, but many people with depression or been exposed to suicide have thought about it. And that, you can kind of go through that. Have you really ever tried to kill yourself before? Have you ever had a plan? Have you thought about how you would do it? And lastly, that intent scale. On a scale of 1 to 5, how likely are you to act on the plan? Now, these three categories are the basic training for people on the crisis line, which I later adapted to working with clinicians and case managers, because if we start to get comfortable knowing that we can evaluate the risk, we can talk to people and know that we may not have to call 911. And I'll tell you quite frankly, in all the training I've done with social service agencies, their protocol most likely was to call the mental evaluation, the MET team, or to call 911. And I would ask them what was the reason, because they thought somebody who talked about it was going to die by suicide and was in danger. That's not necessarily true. Now, if you're unsure and somebody you think is in danger, or they tell you they can't stay safe, yes, you might have to call assistance, you might have to call the med team, you might have to connect them to the crisis line, but you can ascertain the difference pretty easily. Let's go into that in a little more depth with the next slide. So let's look at some of the questions you would ask them if somebody's feeling like they had thoughts. You can check that out by asking, are you thinking about suicide? Has it been on your mind currently? If no, have you been thinking about it the last couple months? People who die by suicide often will tell you they feel like a burden and they think people would be better off without them. Those of you who have lived experience, who have had thoughts of suicide, do you believe that's actually ever true? If you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, check it out. We are all better off with the people around us here, those we serve and those that are in service to others. We make a significant contribution, but again, when our mind constricts, we forget about that. We forget about the people that love us. We forget about what would happen if we die. So oftentimes people feel like their life doesn't matter and they feel like they're trapped. I worked with a gentleman once several years ago who was in a financial crisis, had been working on remodeling a home. All of his money was gone. He was going through a divorce, and he was drinking heavily, and he was suicidal. So I was working with him thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I worked with him. He de-escalated. About a month later, the house sold. His financial problems were resolved. He stopped drinking heavily, and the suicidal thoughts went away. So the reality is we need to become wise about looking the difference between thoughts. Let's go to the next slide. So We need to understand, again, capability really quickly. We can ask questions like, have you attempted suicide in the past? Have you lost someone to suicide? Are you having problems? Are you feeling anxious? And of course, we know the last one, most veterans and most people today may have access to a gun. If they do, then we know that elevates the risk because they have access to a lethal means. Now, again, it doesn't mean everybody that has a gun is going to die by suicide, but gives us a cue on what we can do to really help prevent it at that point. Now, the thing to know about capability, again, it's a higher risk if people are in there, but it still doesn't mean the last thing. Let's look at the last one in terms of intent. If we move beyond capability and look at really, have you already done? Now, that's a line really from our crisis line, because the first question while they're working with someone is to make sure they're not in danger, they've not taken pills, they've not done something to harm themselves. But if people begin to thought about how they would do it, if they have access and have decided that they're thinking about it, and their intent is 1 to 5, 1 being it's not likely, and 5 being I don't know if I can keep myself safe, we now have a high risk situation. Now, here's the thing to remember about this. On most of the 4 and 5 ratings on our suicide prevention line, they were still de-escalated. I worked with a suicidal, one of my clients for several years, and she would call me periodically. I would run through this intent scale. She would tell me she was a 4. Now, again, I'm a trained clinician. I understood the process, so this may not be something you ever have to do, but know that it can be done. And I would work with her and de-escalate. And eventually, by just listening and connecting, she would calm down and she'd be okay. So a lot of times, all we have to do is listen and be available. So I'm going to tell you how to do that with the next couple of slides. So let's really start to understand we want to listen. If we listen long enough, we will figure out that the person, what? They're ambivalent. They want to escape the pain, but they also don't want to leave the people in their lives. They may have forgot about them because of the tunnel or constricted vision that they're having at the moment. So we've got to help them be able to talk. If you can listen to why someone is feeling in crisis, like they feel like they would be better off dead without reacting, they will often remember why they want to live. But you have to give them permission to talk about the bad stuff. And most importantly, you have to hear it when they talk about it. Next slide. So we know again that the process involves really looking at intent, desire, and capability. And we hope that we'll elicit buffers. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. So let's look at this one more time. Why do we know people that are suicidal don't necessarily want to die by suicide? Because of that initial study, which still holds true today. They're dealing with ambivalence. What is ambivalence? Ambivalence is simultaneously having the desire to die while also wanting to live. That most people who die by suicide are feeling that ambivalence. Next slide. So remember, what are we thinking about? Someone who wants to live but can't figure out how to get that. And if we can listen long enough, we will hear that. Next slide. So let's go through briefly how we can help people end the psychache or the pain in their life or get through the crisis till they're okay. Here's some final cues, and then I'm going to go real briefly into this model. Learn how to be able to say and become comfortable. Are you thinking about killing yourself? And here's the key as we progress down. Remember, can you remain calm? Can you become comfortable and know and listen openly and listen and connect to the individual and do your best to not only hear them, but to listen? Now, here's the key. Oftentimes when I was first counseling people, I would listen and they would say, oh, I would ask them that question if I got brave enough, thinking about killing yourself. And the minute they talked about it, well, if you thought about when and why you're going to do it, not anymore. I now stop and say, oh, that must be really awful. You must feel really terrible. What does that tell people? It tells people I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to connect. I'm trying to connect with how they feel. I'm trying to hear them rather than move on to do an analysis. It suddenly takes me from somebody outside of the picture to somebody connected to them. It also allows us to build rapport. And what happens when you build rapport? If you listen and you keep your mouth quiet long enough, you will gather enough information to know what you can do. But most importantly, you will allow them to gather information. Here's the best thing I've learned in doing therapy for 30 years. I don't have to have the answer, nor do I think I should even suggest an answer most of the time. You know why? I haven't lived your life for 30 or 40 or 50 years. You have. You know what works. You know what doesn't work. You know what you think you may want to try, and you know how to evaluate it if I give you the space. But the minute I start making suggestions to you, now you're listening to what I think, which may or may not be anywhere close to what you have or have not done. So here's the key. You don't have to have the answer. You just have to have the courage to listen without judgment and be really curious and ask those questions. What will happen? You'll gather information. And last part of this, alternatives and closure. You will come up with options for individuals who will understand what they can do. And then the last part of this, go ahead, Derek. You will understand through these options, and you'll be able to support people at finding solutions. Now, you can do this with any subject that people are dealing with, and understanding that you're helping them open up their mind. So let's get into the summary of this. So what I want you to do really today with the next slides is I really want you to learn that you can manage a conversation about risk. Here's a few key points for you to remember. Don't ever tell somebody who's thinking about suicide, it's stupid, it's a long-term answer to a short-term problem, they shouldn't think about it, because immediately what does that do? That communicates that I know better than you, that you don't have a right to think the thoughts. Quite frankly, it's none of my business. I'm going to do everything to save your life, but I am not going to discount that you've gotten into so much pain that those thoughts occur. Because if I discount your thinking, you're going to stop listening to me, and you're not going to feel safe, and you're not going to share anything more than I ever wanted to hear from you. But if I make it safe to you and I discuss that, I hear that, I understand it, I don't certainly promote it, but let's talk about your ambivalence. Let's talk about why, what's the reason you want to die? If I can listen to that, you will often tell me without even asking the reasons you haven't. But if I haven't heard them, I could say, what's the reason you're still here? What gives you hope? Those are your buffers. Have you thought about what you would do? Have you thought any more about what you do? If you get through those first couple of questions, somebody will be able to open up and really start to share with you, because their mind will be clear. You'll have eliminated that tunnel vision, because you'll have made it safe for them to get through the dark part of it. And the last thing is safety planning and resources, which is something the VA has initiated with a couple of great clinicians, which is how to set up resources in advance before somebody enters risk, and how to evaluate risk before it occurs. There's a lot of information. Let me finish up here. Next slide. So basically, if you listen, ask, uncover, express, discover, and lastly, discuss, what are you listening for? You're listening to their story. What are you asking about? If they die by suicide. What are you uncovering? Ambivalence. What are you doing in the process? Telling them you hear them, telling them you're sorry to hear that, or it must be terrifically difficult for them to share it, or you understand that this sadness is really intense, and that really, is hard to hear, but I'm here and I'm listening. You discover again through that their protective factors, and then you discuss ways they can stay safe, including maybe putting the gun away, maybe giving it to somebody till the crisis is past, maybe storing the ammunition somewhere else. Last couple slides. So again, I'm going to cue you up. So listen, pay attention here, see if you can get the answers. What do we do with difficult life issues? Go ahead and pull up the other side. We really help them solve problems. What do we do with isolation? We help people connect, and we connect to them, or we connect them to resources. Mental health issues, we get people into treatment. Chronic stress, we remind people of how they've gotten through it. We help them develop coping skills. And lastly, crisis interventions, the ability to listen closely, to go through that process, de-escalate the crisis. One more time with the next slide. What do we do with difficult life issues? We problem solve. Isolation, connect with people. If you do nothing more, learn about connection. Obviously, get people into treatment. It's not your job to save their life. It's just your job to be there to find out if they need the support, and then get them into treatment or support that can save their life. Chronic stress, the key to resilience is reminding people all the stuff they've gotten through. Have them write it down so they remember that they're okay. Crisis, help someone de-escalate by being able to be there for them. And last couple of slides, I think I have one or two more here. Oh, last slide here. And we'll open up for a few more questions. How do you help somebody who's suicidal? One simple thing. Not only have you been thinking about killing yourself, but I want to listen to that response. And I want to be okay with you talking about that. And I want to remind you, you can talk about that with me. Most important thing I learned in dealing with suicidal people and working with them is I have to be the one makes it safe, because they're not going to tell me if they don't know it's safe. And they've been burned too many times by people who've called 911 or people who've overreacted or shamed them or talked them in a just a way that wasn't helpful. So we have to be the ones that said, this is a safe place to talk about it. I'm a psychotherapist. Someone threatens to die or kill somebody, then I can violate their confidentiality and call 911 or the police. So why would you want to tell me that? I have to remind you, you can tell me about it. I have to make an agreement that if forever you aren't safe or don't think you can keep yourself safe, I will help you stay safe. And that may mean calling a rescue. But before we get to that, we can talk about your desires. We can talk about your thoughts. We can talk about, are they bothering you to the point that you've thought of capability or how you would do it? And are you in danger of doing it today on a scale of 1 to 5? Thank you for your attention. That was a lot of information. I hope you got something you can use. And I think we got a few minutes for questions here. And thanks, Derek, for the help on the slides.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. Just really great, valuable, and important information for everyone. Of course, for the individual, but also friends, family members to really just have an understanding of what those needs are and how to address those. So thank you so much again, Robert. We always appreciate your time and your partnership for these workshops. So really just thanks again. So at this time, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the rest of our panel. I know my colleague Sean Campbell, who's another training coordinator with CalTAP, has been kind of monitoring the Q&A. I haven't seen anything come in directly, but if Sean, there's anything specifically that somebody might be able to answer, I'll let you go ahead and field those questions.
Thank you, Derek, and it's good to be here. We actually just got our first question of the day, and can you call the crisis line with someone or for someone else?
No, great question. Thanks, Sean, I appreciate that. Absolutely. One of the things I think you should know is one of the things we did with the temp survivors is we had them all sit in the room and call the crisis line. And when you call the crisis line, you can not only get information if you're not suicidal, and you do want to ask them if they have the time to do that or if they have a volunteer that can talk to it. You can also connect them to the person you're working with. Let's call the crisis line together. I want you to be able to hear it. What would happen is the people who would call in would hear these amazing volunteers, and they would ask, what do you think when I call? And the volunteers would say, I think it's wonderful you called. I'm here to help you. I want to make sure that I can. So you can not only get information if you're concerned about somebody, but you can actually work with a client to use the number, highly advisable. If you call the number 988, just remember you can call the crisis line. It's 988. If you want the veteran specific crisis line, which connects you with veteran resources, you press 1. If you don't want that, just dial 988. Now, some veterans I've worked with are happy to press 1. Some veterans would prefer not to be connected to the VA crisis line. They instead want to really talk to just an anonymous crisis worker. Either one can work. They don't track your number. They don't track your information unless it would get down to a rescue and they needed to do it in an emergency. So it is anonymous and confidential. All right. Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, another question came up was specifically about the recording of this webinar. And once our social media team is done, they will upload it to the Calvet website and you can enjoy it. At this time, there's no other questions.
Okay, perfect. Well, I just wanted to say thank you again. And I also wanted to give a quick highlight of some of the upcoming workshops that we're going to be hosting. We are going to be focusing on some veterans legal services as our theme for the month of April, and some additional supplemental workshops thrown in there as well. So this is just a snapshot, but I do encourage you to follow us along, through our Eventbrite or our newsletter, so that you can stay up to date and actually register and attend our future webinars. I mentioned earlier, we do also encourage your participation in our really brief survey for today's webinar. We really do value this, and it does help us make sure that we're giving the most relevant and up-to-date trainings and workshops for you all today. Also, when this meeting concludes, it should pop up in a separate browser for you automatically as well. So I just wanted to highlight that one more time real quick. And lastly, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service to the veteran community as well, if you're a service provider. And thank you to our partners, Robert, Calvin, and Sean. Also, thank you for your support on the back end as well. We wish you all a happy, safe, and healthy rest of your week and weekend. And please always feel free to reach out to us directly if there's anything that you may need from the CalTAP team. We're happy to assist you. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up and conclude the webinar. So thank you all again and have a great rest of your day and week. Take care.